a new Hollywood baby girl is born.
I know.
Don't do anything weird, like bring out a ring or like get down on one knee. Like, I'm not in the mood today.
All right.
Just so clear.
All right, I hear you. My parents no longer drive at night, sorry. Get out, sorry.
Oh, it's beautiful. Do you want to take a break?
No, it's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Wait, who's Andrew? So Andrew Garfield first shot to fame playing Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012 and its sequel, but he has also made a name for himself in more serious films like The Social Network in 2010 and Hacksaw Ridge in 2016, which earned him an Oscar nomination. He's now all over social media for the promotion of We Live in Time, a film that reflects the sort of role Garfield likes to play, emotionally deep and challenging roles highlighting complex themes. If you listen to Garfield in interviews, I mean, not the puppy one because he was way too distracted, and also not the chicken date one because he was way too into Amelia. But if you listen to the Modern Love podcast interview, or the Anderson Cooper interview, or the A24 interview, that's where you see his true character. He's someone who likes to think things deeply. Maybe a bit too deeply at times, I would argue.
And the longing that we feel here is a kind of unconscious remembrance of a fact, and that fact is that we are all actually one thing. What are you talking about?
You can tell that Garfield knows how to speak about his feelings. He has a way of describing them that is very poetic.
Has that grief stayed with you?
Yeah, it's here now. And
You feel it now?
yeah, and it's the only route to feeling her close again. That's the crazy thing.
He'll drop quotes that I want to put in my Instagram stories with a sad song and a slow motion video of the sea. But most importantly, he cries.
Get out, sorry.
Oh, it's beautiful. Do you want to take a break?
No, it's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
He's a soft boy, a baby girl, the exact opposite of what a real man is supposed to be, and that makes him an interesting case study. By that I mean that the way he is presented in the media highlights uniqueness, unconventionality. That video of him on the Modern Love podcast went viral. That says something about the way our society views men's feelings. So in this video, I want to understand why. Why does a teary 41-year-old make millions of people go, oh, what does that say about masculinity today? Not centuries ago, not 10 years ago, but today. Because things are changing. The Hollywood soft boy is not a rare occurrence anymore. But is it really as cool and revolutionary as people say it is? Well, these are the questions we're going to answer in this video. C'est parti. Masculinity. Well, in French and many other languages, masculinity and femininity are present at all times because objects, activities, everything around us is gendered. We French people live in an anti-work utopia or a gender abolitionist nightmare, depending on the perspective. The way gender is assigned to object and activities looks and sounds natural to us because we're used to it. A chair is feminine, a boat is masculine. That's just the way it is. However, when a new word emerges, we are collectively confronted with the task of having to assign gender. And when I say collectively, I'm referring to a group of old white people called the Immortals, gathered in a fancy big room called l'Académie Française, the French Academy. They are the ultimate authority, assigning every new thing that come their way a gender. For example, the Immortals have for a very long time refused to have feminine forms for jobs. They're like, no, a female secretary is un ministre, not une ministre. An actress is un acteur, not une actrice. Actually, keep that one in mind, it will come back very, very soon. I'm using the example of the French Academy to show that gender is arbitrarily assigned. In that case, we have a group of old conservative guys determining the way we use language, therefore the way we design our thoughts, our societies, and ourselves. Gender is a social construct. Gender is a spectrum. In fact, people perform gender across the political spectrum. That's why in the manosphere you hear about different types of masculinity, like the alpha, the beta, and the sigma. Masculinity influencers tell you that, yeah, you can go from one type of masculinity to another by working hard on yourself. So they indirectly acknowledge that gender is a performance, and you have to perform better. The idea of masculinity being on the spectrum did not emerge in the manosphere or incel communities. Interestingly, incel communities are extremely critical of the gender binary, of straight culture. They constantly make fun of straight people, but they don't want to admit that that gender binary, that system, is completely fucked. They refuse to indulge in the structural analysis, which is what I'm here for. You know me by now. So in 1995, 4 years before queer Canadian student called Alana invented the word incel, sociologist Raelyn Connell wrote Masculinities. In it, Connell explains a couple of things. First, she explains that there is not a single type of masculinity. There are masculinities. That's the title of the book. So masculinity is contextual. It changes across time, across cultures. We tend to forget that because we tend to project our reality onto the past, onto other cultures. But no. What you see on screen right now, these were the hotties getting all the girlies back then. You must sit with it and accept it. I mean, look at that calf muscle. Look at it deeply. Connell also says that while there are different types of masculinities coexisting in time and space, one type of masculinity is seen as better than the other ones. She calls it hegemonic masculinity. It refers to the dominant form of masculinity in a given society. It's the idealized version of masculinity that holds cultural and institutional power. Western hegemonic masculinity has specific traits that you probably already know: authority, competition, emotional restraint or suppression, and heterosexuality. So that's hegemonic masculinity. It's on top of the hierarchy. And below it, you have other types of masculinities. Subordinate masculinities, complicit masculinities, but also marginalized masculinities. We'll look at them separately. In fact, for this video on Andrew Garfield and Hollywood baby girls, we'll specifically look at subordinate masculinities and complicit masculinities. So Garfield became really famous by playing Spider-Man in 2012. Spider-Man is a character who doesn't embody the stereotypical alpha male superhero aesthetic, and the actors who played that role also reflect that. Interestingly, in the 90s animated series, Spider-Man was a bit of a Chad. Looking back on it, and it's painful to think I had a crush on this guy given the information I'm about to give you, but the original Peter Parker was a bit of an incel.
That girl. The girl next door. Mary Jane Watson. The woman I've loved since before I even liked girls. I'd like to tell you that's me next to her.
Now, other Spider-Men like Tom Holland also saw their masculinity being questioned or made fun of.
We have Tammy Holland over here. Body shape goes out like a peplum top. Got the very delicate wrist. Have a lack of brow ridge. No Adam's apple.
Tom Holland himself has played with gender expression. That was 7 years ago. So yeah, the most recent depictions of Spider-Man have shown us men who don't fit in the traditional hegemonic masculinity roles. These types of men could potentially fit into Connell's subordinate masculinities category. The subordinate masculinities category refers to men who are oppressed or stigmatized within the gender order. So the Spider-Man could fit in the sense that despite having many of the privileges of being a hetero guy, they're still looked down upon by society and treated differently from very masculine men. However, there's a reason why I said could and not can or fit. Because, yeah, the Spider-Men are a bit different. They do get a girl eventually, so they still tick the heterosexuality box. They are still desirable. The desirability means that the insecurity and loner vibes aren't something we see as creepy, but rather as mysterious and cute. Andrew Garfield very much embodies that. In interviews, he often appears as a tiny bit weird or socially awkward, but he also gets flirty, he gets sassy, so he's different, but he remains desirable. That's why progressive media loves him. I mean, let's have a look at the media coverage, actually. Using the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. That platform gathers up the world news and uncovers these hidden biases shaping how stories are framed, so we can easily see which outlets push which narrative and why. They have this little research function that I used to find my article. Here it is. Okay, so on this topic, we have 28 articles, mostly written by the left and center, so see what I mean? I really like this feature, factuality, also a big fan of this one, ownership, to, keep in mind that the media is mostly owned by just a few corporations, conglomerates. If we look at this story in particular, we get to compare the right, for example, with Fox News saying that it went further than necessary, whereas on the left and center, we have more neutral analysis, I would say. If you want to dig a bit deeper, you can click on the media outlet and you get even more information on factuality, ownership, media bias, the type of stories that they cover, and this really cool feature, Blind Spot. Blind Spot allows you to look at the stories that have been disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum, for the left, for the right. I always recommend checking what the other side is saying because that can help you become a better advocate for your own ideas, for your own cause. If that resonates with you, if you want to get nerdy like me or just think more critically about the news you consume, you can go to ground.news/Alice or scan the QR code on the screen right now. My viewers get a massive 50% off their top tier Vantage plan. That's the one I'm using and loving at the moment. I'm quite specific with the brands I work with on this channel, and Ground News is a tool that I think is very useful, very beneficial. So yeah, I highly recommend you try it out. So yeah, I was saying that the subordinate masculinities category wouldn't really work for the Spider-Man, including Andrew Garfield, because they still get a girl, they are still desirable. I would say that Garfield better fits in the complicit masculinities category, meaning men who do not fully conform to the hegemonic ideal, but still benefit from patriarchy, sometimes passively, sometimes actively, as we'll see later on. Now, the term complicit implies something quite negative. It implies that this guy, who's so emotional and plays with puppies, would be complicit in asserting the patriarchal order. Like, how is that possible? After looking at what the media says, as we've just done, it'd be tempting to say the contrary. Andrew Garfield challenges traditional masculinity roles. He's a positive masculine figure. Well, in order to make my case, we have to go back in time a little bit.
How did Spider-Man get his costume?
It's kind of a feminine thing to do, but he really kind of made a very masculine costume out of a very feminine
It's feminine how?
I would say that femininity is about more delicacy
nice.
and precision and detail work and craftsmanship. Like my mother, she's an amazing craftsman. She in fact made my first Spider-Man costume when I was 3. So I use it as a compliment to compliment the feminine, not just in women but in men as well. We all have feminine in us.
Obviously, that little moment caught a lot of media attention, and Garfield had to explain himself.
I used the word feminine, and I wasn't talking about gender. I wasn't talking about women. I was talking about feminine energy. We all got feminine energy in us as men, and women have feminine and masculine energy in them as women. So I was actually using the word feminine that way, and Em knew that, but she also knew that the young kids in the audience may not have followed that. So she was like, just make sure you clarify what you mean by feminine. I'm like, oh, exactly, yeah, good. So then I was able to say, well, we all have masculine and feminine energies, and it's a huge conversation to have about masculine and feminine. I'm actually going to write an article about it because I know certain publications said that I made a sexist comment, and I really didn't, because I wasn't talking about gender. I was talking about feminine and yin and yang. Yin and yang. We all have yin and we all have yang. So that's what I was saying. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that, because if anyone who spends 20 seconds with me knows I'm the most feminine man you'll ever the sexism is not even a word I know. So
yeah, this is all very messy. These interviews happened quite some time ago, but even at that time, people found it a bit weird.
Costume out of a very feminine.
It's feminine how?
Feminine in the sense is
the energies Andrew Garfield talks about are nothing but gender roles with spiritual language attached to them. He says that the legacy, which comes with the act of suing, is a feminine value, but that the hero costume is masculine. Now, sorry, but how can that be considered masculine? Look at the slim skulls. I mean, yeah, that was considered the masculine appeal back in the days, but today standards have changed. But Garfield explained that this has nothing to do with gender, because men and women both have feminine and masculine energy in them. Quote, I was talking about the feminine quality that is in every man and every woman, and in certain activities and certain things. End of the quote. I mean, we can only half blame him, because that was kind of the dominant feminist discourse at the time, mainstream feminist discourse. You know, that whole thing of masculine versus feminine energy, the yin-yang, or this idea that women and men have different languages, men come from Mars and women from Venus. You see, mainstream feminists of the time, so we're talking about the 2000s to 2010s, I would say, well, they wanted to bring men to feminism by highlighting the femininity in them. They accepted to caricature womanhood into a series of key feminine traits, delicacy, softness, care, that men could also find in themselves to create that bond between men and women so that men could empathize with women. They basically told men, hey, you think that men and women are completely separate? Like two different species, speaking completely different languages even? Well, look a bit deeper inside you. Find the feminine in you, the care, the warmth, the love. Think about your kids. Think about your wife. How does that make you feel? Yeah, I can see that smile on your face. That's it. Let those emotions spread all over your body. Let them soften every muscle. Relax. You can cry now. Anyway, other feminists like bell hooks also sought to draw men to the cause by showing them that they were also victims of the patriarchy. That's why she wrote The Will to Change. In The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity and Love, bell hooks digs into how society's traditional ideas about masculinity trap men emotionally. She argues that men are often taught to be tough and to keep their emotions under control. That ends up harming their relationship with friends, with family, women, kids. So she described patriarchy as a system of norms imposed on people across the gender spectrum. For many, that meant that men were no longer the perpetrators of that system. They were victims too. After feminists did the groundwork and got the tomatoes thrown at them on the public forum, men started to appropriate those ideas and promote new models of masculinity.
It's a huge conversation to have about masculine and feminine. I'm actually going to write an article about it.
The most obvious example right now, and someone who was at the center of some drama recently, is Justin Baldoni. Baldoni has made positive masculinity his brand. He works with Liz Plank, aka Feminist Fabulous, on the podcast Man Enough, which aims to change our perception of masculinity. Justin Baldoni comes across as someone who deeply cares about the project he's embarked on. We saw it during the promotion of It Ends With Us, when Baldoni distanced himself from Blake Lively to center the story on domestic abuse prevention. Not all media male feminists are Baldonis though. In France, we even invented a term to refer to those men who appropriate feminism in the worst ways possible. We call them pro-fem, literally pro-feminism, so pro-feminism. The pro-fem loves to talk about his feminism. He probably read All About Love or The Will to Change by bell hooks. He sometimes cooks, he sometimes cleans, but his understanding of what feminism is quite flawed. Now, what do we mean by flawed? Well, let's listen to Garfield once again.
She's the greatest actress I know, screw actress, actor. Like I don't really use that word actress. I'm talking actor. I'm talking like no gender differentiation. Like she is a genius.
And let me read you this passage again. Quote, "What makes Peter Parker an amazing superhero is his femininity. In the sense of his delicacy, his sensitivity, his capacity for emotion, his capacity to feel, and his capacity for compassion, and for loving thy neighbor, and for taking care of anybody, no matter if they're black, white, man, woman, gay, lesbian, straight. He does not discriminate in terms of who he saves, in terms of who he's taking care of." End of the quote. You see, in both cases, the masculine is seen as the default, the basis on which we apply feminine traits. This seems to be what feminism means to him. Keep the basis, keep the rules as they are, but just add a little bit of femininity, some softness here and there. Spider-Man remains the ultimate savior. The difference is that heteronormative Spider-Man would only care about his damsel in distress, whereas feminist Spider-Man cares about everyone. You know, the queers, the blacks, the women, everyone, all the marginalized people. But I want to insist on the fact that the person doing the saving and the people being saved, so the person holding the power and strength and those who are seen as marginalized, remain the same. Similarly, the way he switched from actress to actor, so feminine to the default masculine when wanting to elevate Emma Stone, is revealing of the gender hierarchy he has internalized. In both cases, the point of reference is the masculine, which is exactly what feminists want to overcome. Feminist movements have worked on asserting women's subjectivity by dismantling gender stereotypes that frame them as different, inferior. So yeah, Andrew needs to update his feminism. That gives year 2K, but not in a trendy way. Actually, I don't know, because to be honest with you, the "we're all victims of patriarchy" discourse is still very present in mainstream media, like that was just a few days ago.
So to the men who love us, let me just try to paint a picture of what it will feel like if America, the wealthiest nation on earth, keeps revoking basic care from its women, and how it will affect every single woman in your life.
It's crazy to see the amount of disclaimers feminists have to do just to make a basic point, like having access to healthcare. It is clear that the socialization of men prevent them from empathizing with women. We women know it very well, because we also grew up learning that femininity is inferior, that womanhood is bad. Women are mean, they're gossipy, they're liars. We call it internalized misogyny. I had a lot of it growing up. It took me a lot of time to start empathizing with women. But you see, even when I started accepting the fact that I'm a woman too, and when I started valuing the women around me, I quickly realized that that wasn't enough. Empathy is not enough. Feminism or social justice isn't just empathy. And a lot of pro-fem don't get it. Andrew Garfield's metric for social justice is empathy. I mean, look at this article I found. It was published in The Guardian 7 years ago, so the same year that happened. I love the Pope. He's a really progressive guy. He's talking progressively about the LGBTQ+ community. He's turning the dial up slowly by however much he can. He's doing that slow work of God stuff. That was during the promotion of a film directed by Mel Gibson, a profoundly despicable person, sexist, racist, anti-Semitic, you name it, and Andrew Garfield defending him, saying, quote, "He's done a lot of beautiful healing with himself." Garfield added, "And thank God, because he's an amazing filmmaker, and I think he deserves to make films. He deserves to tell stories, because he has a very, very big, compassionate heart. He's the kind of director that would come from behind the monitors, just with his eyes wet. The feminine energy, this is where things get interesting. And he's a visceral storyteller, so he can feel. He's like he can't help but feel everything. He's a real empathetic guy. So the Pope is progressive because he has empathy for LGBTQ+ people. Mel Gibson should be given a platform and money to make his film because he's empathetic and he cries sometimes, he feels things. I'm sorry, but that is such a detached and lazy view of what social justice is. That's precisely where the phrase complicit masculinities start to make a lot of sense. The men in that category understand that there is something wrong with the gender order, but they continue to support, to work with, or even behave like those who continue to enforce that order.
The LA County Sheriff's Office has launched a domestic violence investigation. The recordings allegedly have Grigorieva asking, "What kind of man is that who would hit a woman while she is holding a child in her hands, hitting her twice in the face?"
And I know some of you won't understand why I hyper-focus on one person. Why do I care about Andrew Garfield so much? He's just a random guy who said weird stuff in the past but kinda stopped now. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to cancel him? I totally see what you mean. But first, I think it's important to keep in mind the past. It's something I'm working on personally. I give way too many chances. I'm the embodiment of rehabilitative justice. But I also think that Andrew Garfield is such a great example of why we need to keep individuals in check. I mean, sure, patriarchy is a system. And sure, it creates norms that seek to establish a stable ideal of manhood and womanhood. We're all victims of that system. Women are still held back by expectations to remain passive, agreeable, attractive, more than intellectual. Men, on the other hand, struggle to open up, which leads to bad mental health and higher suicide rates. So yes, we're all victims, but to a different degree. That's why Connell coined the term complicit masculinity. Men can be victims of patriarchy, but they still hold a lot of power over women. Men still have agency, they are not puppets of patriarchy. You see, in system analysis, we like to look at the structures forging individuals. But the problem with that sort of analysis is that it can remove agency from individuals. We just turn individuals into victims of a system. If we're molded by the system, that means we don't have any agency, so we're all victims of that system. That's how you can end up with pro-fem, meaning men who see the structure, they see the system, but they don't see themselves as having agency in that system. They only see themselves as victims. That's why it's crucial to remind ourselves that individuals participate in systems. The two are in constant interactions. We're all victims, but we're also all participants. Some are more victims than others, some participate more than others. But unless we're willing to recognize our agency in partaking in those systems, well, we can't claim to be agents in changing it. So no, Andrew Garfield is not a feminist. The fact that he cries, the fact that he plays with puppies won't change that, you know. Our Hollywood baby girls still have a lot of work to do, as we've seen quite recently.
If someone attacks me, I'm not going to go phone.
I admit,
Hold on a second. Sorry, Mom, 1 second.
that's what girls have to think about all the time.
Yeah.
Am I right, ladies?
But you know, I think we can trust them, because they've shown signs that they listen and are willing to change and stand for the right thing in the right way.
It's that weird thing of the more you know, the less you know kind of thing.
Right.
Like, I feel like I thought I knew a lot more when I was younger, and now I realise how little I know.
Yeah.
How little I knew.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comments section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. Before I leave, I would like to thank my Patreons for their support. A special thank to top tier Patreons, Wolf Gratz, Sebastian, Gazi Chic, Neil Vermeer, Patrick Button, Divish Mohanmina, Jeff Lee, Yelan, Taya Matin, Nick, Brandon, James, Ojwal, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Ivan, Toki, Koriji, Tristan, Patricia, Jan, Donage, Alex, Manuel, Christopher, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. Finally, thank you to the sponsor of this video, Ground News. I'll see you very, very soon. Salut!